A friend of mine posted a video yesterday, privately, talking about a cultural problem we have that really gets in the way of efforts to deal with widespread false belief. The problem is, in order to talk about how to solve the problems of widespread false belief, we need to discuss the experiences and motives that lead people to those beliefs. But a lot of people aren't willing to do that, and a lot of people will get mad at you if you try and do it, because implicitly, they believe that understanding is the same as agreeing. That if you think about why a person believes the things they believe, what you're doing is talking yourself into believing that thing. Frankly, that assumption isn't necessarily wrong. So the mainstream cultural way that we understand experiencing false narratives is suspension of disbelief. The argument goes that when you interact with a fiction, you are constantly aware that the fiction is not real and constantly making the decision to not acknowledge that awareness. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this is not by default the case. A lot of evidence points to the idea that while we may understand that the literal events taking place in a text aren't happening in our reality, we do accept the idea that the things that happen in the text really happen in the text, and that therefore things like cause and effect relationships in the text have a literal bearing on reality. It's why some people get really mad about criticisms of a work of fiction that have like sexually exploitative imagery in them, and will cite the in-text explanation for why that imagery is occurring, because they don't believe that like the story really happened, but they do believe that the story world is real in itself. It's why in the 2000s we had Congress people arguing against the overwhelming scientific evidence against the claim that torture works, and citing the show 24 as evidence. They don't believe the show is real, but they do believe that the events of the show are illustrative of real-life cause and effect. And to be clear, it's not particularly hard to get past this. This is what is meant by like critical analysis or critical reading. Nearly any person is capable of acquiring this skill without particular difficulty. But it is a skill that has to be learned, and while any high school student could and should learn it, it is not necessarily reliably the case that they do. And this is why we have a lot of people who can't distinguish between listening and agreement, or between empathy and support. I don't know what can be done about this. I know that like 50 years of liberal arts supporters saying we need the liberal arts hasn't worked. And if someone doesn't already agree with me on this point, they are overwhelmingly unlikely to hear me out because they'll interpret it as attempted brainwashing. Stuff like this makes trying to solve systemic problems feel like trying to invent a parachute while falling from the plane, but like, given the odds of getting out okay if we don't, I'm not sure there's a better use of our time anyway.